Mom said, "Your kid's birthday might make your sister's kids feel left out. Maybe skip it." I grinned, told my daughter we'd have an even better celebration, and drove off. A year later, my sister's kids were envious of the photos from my daughter's 10th birthday party. That jealousy became the fire that finally burned the family tree. Mom ruined everything back then. And I think that was the moment something finally cracked in me. Something quiet but permanent. It wasn't just about my daughter's birthday. It was about all the little things that had piled up for years, stacked on top of each other like dirty dishes no one wanted to clean. But that birthday, or what should have been one, was the last plate on the pile. My daughter had just turned 9, not a baby anymore, but still young enough to get excited about balloons and cupcakes and paper crowns. I'd asked my mom if we could do something small for her, just at home, nothing fancy. She looked at me and said, "Your kid's birthday will make your sister's boys feel left out. Just skip it. Be mature about it." That was it. No hesitation, no shame. Like, she genuinely believed it made sense. Like, my child was supposed to sit there and clap while her cousins got all the attention again. We'd been living at my parents' house for almost 2 years by then. After my ex-husband left and started a new family across state lines, I had nowhere else to go. Mom said we could stay, but what she really meant was, you can stay, but don't expect kindness. Not for you. Not for your daughter. They help with childcare. Sure. But they also watched her like hawks, making comments about her body, her clothes, her face, her laugh. My dad once said she needed to cut carbs before she gets mistaken for a fridge. My mom laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My daughter heard it from the stairs. She didn't say anything, but the next day she asked for a smaller plate at dinner. I should have left sooner. I know that now. But when you're trying to work, stay afloat, and raise a kid alone, you cling to whatever feels stable, even if it's poisoned. The only person who acted like my daughter mattered was my sister. He came by that day, the one Mom ruined, and slipped an envelope into my hand. It had $300 in it. No card, just the money. She kissed my girl on the forehead and left without staying. I think she felt ashamed, like she knew what was happening, but didn't know how to stop it. That night, my daughter asked why Nana didn't give her a birthday gift. I told her maybe they forgot, but she didn't ask again. She just lay there in bed staring at the ceiling, humming to herself like she was pretending it didn't hurt. I went downstairs to do laundry and found my parents laughing with my sister's kids about the video game consoles they got last week. New expensive ones. There were still pieces of wrapping paper on the floor. One of them had a card that said, "To my favorite boys." I recognized Mom's handwriting. I didn't say anything. Just walked back up, packed a few things, and sat beside my daughter until morning. When she woke up, I told her we were going on an adventure. Somewhere better. We left without saying goodbye, moved to Columbus, got a tiny place on the edge of town. I kept working the same job remotely for a while, then got a better one that paid more and didn't make me feel like I was always catching up. My daughter started laughing again, really laughing. I signed her up for gymnastics. We put stickers on the fridge when she finished a book. I taught her how to make pancakes, and I started planning because when her 10th birthday came around, I wasn't just going to make it special for her. I was going to make sure everyone who treated her like she was invisible would see exactly what they'd thrown away. Her 10th birthday landed on a Saturday, and by the time it arrived, I'd been planning it for nearly a year. I chose the date back when we first moved to Columbus, when everything still felt uncertain. But I knew one thing for sure. Her 10th birthday was going to be different. Undeniable. The kind of day that no one could ignore and no one would ruin. Especially not the people who acted like she didn't exist. I rented out a lakeside venue just outside the city. Small, beautiful, peaceful, with string lights over a wraparound deck, plenty of space for games, and a bounce house shaped like a castle. Inside there were tables for crafts, a cupcake bar, music, and a woman dressed as the cartoon heroine my daughter still adored. Even if she pretended she didn't anymore, I spent more than I probably should have. I didn't care. She was turning 10, and for once, I wanted her to feel like the center of everything. I wanted her to feel seen. I invited neighbors, her classmates, a couple of families from gymnastics, and my sister. That was it. No, Mom. No, Dad. I didn't even consider it. Not after last year. Not after they acted like her 9th birthday was an inconvenience. Not after they told me to cancel it, so her cousins wouldn't feel left out. My sister texted the week before and said she was bringing her kids. I paused before responding. Her boys were okay when she was around, but out of her sight, They echoed everything from their grandparents. Things that made my daughter cry when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I dreaded them being there. But I convinced myself it might be different this time. Maybe they'd notice how joyful she was and feel something. Regret perhaps, or envy. Anything over apathy. The party began flawlessly. She had on a light blue dress with silver stars on the sleeves. When she spun, it sparkled in the sunlight. Her friends pulled her from one activity to the next. She kept kicking off her shoes, and her cheeks ached from grinning. I hadn't seen her that happy in ages. Not since before we moved away. For the first hour, everything seemed perfect. Then her cousins showed up. They didn't say hi or happy birthday. They headed right to the snacks, piled up plates, and started tossing food bits at each other like it was a casual barbecue. In no time, one yanked down a streamer and burst a balloon. Another tipped over a centerpiece we'd crafted together the evening before. A paper flower arrangement she'd stayed up late perfecting because she was so proud. She watched it topple and crack. She stayed silent. She just turned and walked to the lake's edge, standing alone gazing at the water. Then, right behind me, I heard it. Why does she even get a party? Nana says she's not really part of our family anyway. A hush followed, the type where adults stiffen and some kids look baffled, like the rules shifted without warning. I spun around, ready to lash out at whoever spoke. But my sister was already there. Her face pale. She seized both boys by the arms, muttered a quick sorry to me, and departed. Didn't stay for cake. The atmosphere changed after that. Like the joy had been drained away. Some parents tried to rally, but the kids sensed it. They knew something was off. My daughter returned from the lake and posed for photos with a smile, but her eyes seemed weary. She didn't whine or tear up. She just faded a bit. That night, we lounged on the couch reviewing the pictures. She chose her top ones, the early ones before her cousins came, and asked if we could share them with Grandma. I said, of course. And I did. I sent a whole set. All the grins, all the excitement, especially the one where she's amid kids mid-song, laughing with frosting on her chin and a sparkler candle in hand. Her cousins weren't in it, nor were my parents. Just her shining among people who truly wanted to celebrate. I attached no note, just the images. They viewed them. I know because 2 days later, my uncle, my dad's older brother, phoned me. First call in over a year. He mentioned seeing the photos. He'd heard about the incident. Then he said, I'm coming to pick you up. It's time your parents get a reminder of who they once were and what they've turned into. My uncle arrived in a dark blue truck just after noon on Thursday. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. Not since a wedding where my parents whispered all night about how shameful I looked in a secondhand dress. He was always the family outsider. Less critical, more attentive, the type who remembered birthdays without apps. As a kid, he'd slip me extra presents when Mom favored my sister. He got out with a folder in one hand and a small bag of cookies in the other. Said they were for my daughter. Homemade chocolate chip. We didn't linger. I told my daughter I'd return shortly. Then he and I drove to the house I hadn't entered since the night we fled. I wasn't sure what to anticipate. Maybe cool detachment, maybe forced grins. What I didn't expect was walking into the living room and spotting the photo I'd sent. The party one, printed and on the coffee table. My mother was in the kitchen brewing coffee, like this was routine. My father lounged in his recliner, TV blaring too loud, not glancing my way. The tension in his neck showed he knew I was there. Uncle David didn't sit. He stood firm. He faced my parents and said, You've crossed a line. They turned slowly, wordless. Mom tried to speak, but he interrupted. I saw the pictures. I heard what the boys said. I spoke to your neighbors. I spoke to your daughter. What happened to you two? Mom minimized it. Called me overdramatic. Said the party wasn't such a big thing. Dad grumbled about me always seeking spotlight. That's when Uncle David opened the folder. It held old family snapshots. Me as a child beaming by homemade cakes, my sister and me in identical clothes. Even a note Dad wrote me in middle school after I fell ill, calling me his brave little fighter. He displayed them one by one. Remember this girl? He asked. You used to love her like she counted. Now you treat her like dirt, like she's fortunate to be endured. My mother claimed I chose poorly, married a bad guy, made errors, and now played victim. Uncle David didn't raise his voice. He scanned the room, eyed the couch where I'd sobbed myself to sleep some nights, and shook his head. He said, I gave you that car out there so you wouldn't be trapped indoors. Want to treat your own kid like trash? Then walk. Maybe the exercise will jog some decency back into you. He snatched the keys from the hook by the door, pocketed them, and headed out. I said nothing throughout. I didn't have to. They watched as I trailed him, not with remorse or sorrow, just a dazed quiet, like they'd been surprised by someone who wasn't meant to intervene. We returned to my place around 4 p.m. My daughter was at the kitchen table sketching in crayon. When she saw me, she beamed and hurried over. She asked if we'd visit Grandma and Grandpa soon. I knelt and said maybe, but not until they recall how to be nice. A week later, my dad suffered a stroke. He fell in the backyard while tending the garden and was rushed to the ER. My sister called, crying hard. He slipped into a coma by morning. And despite it all, I ended up in that hospital room, beside my mother, who seemed tinier than ever, gazing at the man who'd once teased my daughter to skip sweets until she slimmed down. I didn't forgive them then. I didn't speak. But something changed, because even if he couldn't hear, I stayed anyway, ensuring someone was in his corner. Hospitals are noisy in the subtlest ways. Beeping machines, footsteps, the faint buzz of lights. But it merges into a silence that makes you confront your thoughts. I sat for hours watching him breathe via tubes, unsure if he was aware inside or too distant to return. The doctor said the stroke was serious enough to cause unconsciousness, but not fatal yet. Still, no words, no movement, just his chest rising and falling, the four drip steady. My mother sat opposite, silent too, clutching her purse like a lifeline, fixated on his wristband as if it held answers. I brought my daughter on day 2. She wore a blue hoodie and gripped my hand tightly. She stayed quiet until beside his bed. Then she whispered, "Does he still know who I am?" I said yes. I didn't know if it was true. That night, she made a card and handed it to me before school. Stick figures of her and Grandpa hand in hand, with, "I still love you even if you were mean sometimes," in purple marker. I tucked it under his pillow unseen. Days went on in that hushed pattern. I visited before work, after, before meals, after lights out. My sister appeared more, bringing books, treats, cousin news. She skipped the party topic. So did I. My mother sometimes stayed overnight in the rigid chair. She never asked for my aid. Nor did she tell me to go. It felt like we were holding onto the same lifeboat, just on opposite ends. On the 5th night, I came to the hospital late, after putting my daughter to sleep. The halls were cold, dim. A well-dressed woman was by his bed, holding his hand, talking softly. She startled when I said, "Excuse me," claiming she was an old friend. I pointed out he hadn't worked in a decade. She left quickly, saying she shouldn't have come. The next morning, over burnt coffee in the cafeteria, I asked my mother about her. She admitted the woman was around for years, not a full affair, but enough to hurt. She'd known but stayed silent, fearing she'd end up alone like me. I didn't respond, just returned to his room. That night, he moved, then spoke the next day. My name, just once. He cried, apologizing for how they'd treated me, for forgetting I was his too. I didn't forgive him yet, but something eased. At home, I watched my daughter sleep, thinking maybe this was a real start, not a happy ending. He came home in March, frail but awake. He hugged my daughter tightly. She hugged back. No big talks, just a quiet shift. He wasn't the man who mocked her weight anymore. Softer, fragile. Then gifts appeared. Sneakers she'd wanted, $500 in an envelope, a warm apple pie with a note, "Still learning." My mother gave her a necklace I'd thought I'd lost as a kid. Small changes grew. Mom stopped criticizing, started listening. My sister said Mom paid for summer camp, apologized for how we were raised. At a family dinner, Dad spoke slowly, admitting they'd failed us, promising to do better. My daughter nodded, brave enough to let them try. Mom cried openly. Things didn't change overnight, but they started. Mom took my daughter for smoothies, no lectures. Dad sent postcards, called weekly. They helped quietly. New laptop, tires, sang. Let us make the next years easier. My sister changed too. Teaching her boys' family means showing up. They cheered at my daughter's recital, gave her $5 each, called her cool. It wasn't perfect. Some days, old silences lingered, but my daughter's hugs softened Mom. She asked to spend Thanksgiving with them. The house smelled of turkey and hope. Dad spoke steadily. Mom served without judgment. My daughter said, "I'm thankful my family found their way back to me." No one spoke. Words couldn't capture her forgiveness. For months later, it's steady. My daughter paints with Mom, reads dad's stories. Her cousins bragged at her science fair. My sister and I talk like sisters again. My daughter's brighter, saying, I like how everything feels now. So do I.